The old woman clutched her grocery bag tightly, completely unaware that the next few minutes would change everything, not just for her, but for the most feared man in all of Kowloon. Years later, people would still gather in tea houses and training halls to talk about that evening, not because it was the greatest fight ever witnessed, but because it was the moment fear finally met someone who refused to bow before it. That man was Bruce Lee. But before Bruce entered the story, another name controlled these streets: Chen Wei. If intimidation could take human form, it would have worn his face. At just 28 years old, he had made himself the undisputed ruler of his district through one simple tool: making people afraid. Nobody voted for him, nobody admired him, but everyone feared him, and for Chen Wei, that was more than enough. The narrow streets of Kowloon belonged to hard-working people. Fishmongers rose before sunrise. Laborers pushed through 12-hour shifts until their backs gave out. Street vendors stood under the burning summer sun just to earn enough for their families. These were people who faced real struggles every day, and yet many of them feared one thing more than poverty itself: running into Chen Wei. He was a genuine fighter. Nobody argued that. Tournament victories, defeated challengers, broken boards, shattered ribs, real skill, but success had slowly poisoned him. The stronger he became, the more he enjoyed watching weakness in others. The more trophies he collected, the less room he left for decency. Eventually, people stopped thinking of him as a martial artist. They started seeing him the way you see a storm: something unpredictable, something destructive, something that enjoyed the damage it caused. Now here's something worth thinking about. Have you ever stayed quiet when you should have spoken up? Have you ever stepped aside to avoid conflict, even when you knew something was wrong? Most people have. And that feeling, that silence you swallowed, that's exactly what Chen Wei relied on. He counted on it. He built his power on it. On that particular evening, the July heat still pressed down on the city. The streets glistened from an earlier rain. Steam curled up from food stalls. Neon signs blinked to life above crowded sidewalks. The district moved with the energy of an ordinary evening, ordinary for everyone except Chen Wei, because this was his favorite time of day. The streets were full. Hundreds of eyes were available to witness him. His reputation felt most alive in crowds like these. He moved through the market with his chest forward and his hands wrapped in white fighting tape. Two students walked closely behind him, hanging on his every word. To them, Chen Wei wasn't just a fighter. He was a living legend. His boasts sounded like wisdom. His insults sounded like confidence. His arrogance looked like strength. They hadn't yet learned the difference between those things. Most people never do until the moment arrives that forces them to. As Chen Wei walked, people shifted aside. Not dramatically, not obviously, just enough to avoid the trouble they knew he carried with him. He noticed every single person who stepped away, and it satisfied him. Power had become an addiction. And the problem with addiction is that you always need more. More control, more attention, more proof, more fear. Without realizing it, Chen Wei had become a man who actively searched for opportunities to remind people who he was. And fate was about to hand him one. Near the end of the market stood an elderly woman named Madame Li. Small and thin, her silver hair tied neatly behind her head. Time had bent her back slightly. It had never broken her spirit. She carried a cloth bag containing vegetables, dried shrimp, and a metal thermos she had owned for nearly 15 years. After collecting the last of her groceries, she began walking home. At that exact moment, Chen Wei rounded a corner without watching where he was going. Neither of them saw the other coming. Their shoulders collided. The impact was minor, the kind of small accident that happens 1,000 times a day in a crowded city. The kind of moment that decent people resolve with a simple apology and move on. Madame Li stumbled. Her bag slipped. Vegetables scattered across the wet pavement. The thermos rolled away. Oranges bounced into the street. A nearby vendor instinctively moved to help her. Then he recognized Chen Wei and stopped. The market grew quiet. Everyone understood what might come next. Madame Li looked up. "Oh, I'm sorry." Her voice was polite and gentle, exactly the kind of response any reasonable person would simply accept. Chen Wei looked at her, then at the scattered groceries, then at the people watching around him. And something ugly woke up inside him. He had an audience. The corner of his mouth rose slowly. Then he laughed, not because anything was funny, because humiliation to him was entertainment. "Old woman," he said loudly, "you should learn how to walk." People looked away, others pretended not to hear. Nobody wanted involvement. Madame Li stayed calm. "You walked into me." The words weren't aggressive. They were simply true, and truth is dangerous to an arrogant man, especially when spoken in public. "What did you say?" "You walked into me." The market became even quieter. One of Chen Wei's own students looked nervous. Everyone present understood exactly what was happening. The old woman wasn't afraid, and Chen Wei wasn't accustomed to that. For years, people had apologized to him even when he was the one in the wrong. Fear had always protected his ego. Now a 70-year-old woman with a cloth grocery bag was accidentally threatening it. The response was immediate. Chen Wei stepped forward and kicked her thermos. The metal container flew across the pavement and crashed loudly into a wooden stall. Several people in the crowd gasped. Madame Li stared at her thermos. She didn't move. For a moment, she looked less angry than disappointed, as if the world had simply confirmed something she already suspected. "You should be ashamed of yourself," she said quietly. Those words landed harder than any punch. Chen Wei's eyes narrowed. He opened his mouth. Then another voice interrupted. "That's enough." The words weren't loud, yet somehow everyone heard them. Near a fish stall stood a man dressed in simple dark clothing. Nothing about his appearance demanded attention. No expensive suit, no dramatic entrance, no entourage. Yet every eye in the market immediately found him, because real confidence carries its own presence. It doesn't need an announcement. Bruce Lee stepped forward, calm, relaxed, unhurried, like a man taking an evening walk, not a man moving toward potential danger. The crowd recognized him almost instantly. Whispers spread quickly. Some faces showed excitement. Others showed fear, because everyone knew exactly what Chen Wei was capable of doing. Bruce ignored all of it. He ignored Chen Wei. He ignored the growing tension. Instead, he bent down and picked up Madame Li's vegetables, carefully, one by one, respectfully. He retrieved the thermos. He placed everything back into her bag and handed it to her with both hands. "Are you all right?" Madame Li looked at him. For the first time since the collision, she smiled. "Yes, good." Bruce nodded. Only then did he turn toward Chen Wei. The entire market held its breath. Two men stood facing each other. Chen Wei radiated aggression. Bruce radiated control. And somehow, without a single strike being thrown, everyone felt the balance shifting. Chen Wei noticed it too. He hated it. "Do you have a problem?" Chen Wei asked. Bruce smiled calmly. "No, no problem." Then he added, "I just don't enjoy watching someone bully an elderly woman." Several people turned away to hide their reactions. Chen Wei stepped closer. "I suggest you mind your own business." Bruce nodded thoughtfully. "Normally, I would. But once someone starts harming innocent people, it stops being just one person's business." A heavy silence followed. Chen Wei's pride demanded a response. "Do you know who I am?" "I've heard enough." "Then you know I can knock you unconscious with a single strike." People in the crowd shifted nervously. They believed it. They had seen him do similar things before. Bruce looked at him quietly, then he smiled. A small smile, the kind that belongs to someone who already knows something their opponent doesn't. "One strike?" Bruce asked. "One strike." "Maybe," Bruce replied. The answer confused everyone. Then Bruce continued, "But if you're truly as capable as you claim, why don't we find out properly?" He gestured toward Master Wang's nearby training hall. "Tomorrow night, in the ring, in front of everyone. No excuses, no innocent people caught between us." The crowd could barely process what they were hearing. Bruce Lee had just issued a public challenge to the most feared man in the district, directly, calmly, without a single moment of hesitation. Chen Wei stared at him, then he laughed, a loud, confident laugh, the laugh of a man who considered the outcome already settled. "Fine," his voice carried through the market. "Tomorrow night," he pointed at Bruce. But when I win, you serve as my personal assistant for 1 year. Gasps spread through the crowd. Even Bruce's supporters exchanged worried looks. The condition was deliberately humiliating, perfectly suited to Chen Wei's character. Everyone waited. Bruce's answer came immediately: "I accept." The laughter faded. Something in Bruce's composure unsettled Chen Wei. It felt wrong, off balance. Bruce added his own condition. "If I win," the market went completely still. Bruce pointed toward Madame Li. "You apologize to her." Then he gestured toward the gathered crowd. "And to everyone else you've mistreated." Chen Wei blinked. Out of every possible demand, money, ownership of the dojo, public recognition, that was what Bruce wanted: an apology. For the first time that evening, Chen Wei hesitated, only for a second, but Bruce noticed, and so did everyone else. "Fine," Chen Wei finally said, "tomorrow night." The terms were set. As Bruce walked away, the market slowly returned to life. People spoke in excited whispers. Some predicted Bruce would win. Many feared what Chen Wei would do to him. Nobody truly knew what would happen. But everyone knew one thing without question. For the first time in years, the most feared man in Kowloon had been challenged directly. And tomorrow night, an entire community would gather to find out whether fear was truly unbeatable, or whether it had finally met someone it couldn't break. And ask yourself honestly, when you've seen someone being mistreated and stayed silent, what stopped you? Was it genuine helplessness, or was it the fear that stepping forward might cost you something? That question matters more than you think. The following evening, Kowloon felt different. The streets were identical, the shops were the same, the people went about their routines as usual, but beneath all of it, something electric moved through the air. By noon, the story had already traveled beyond the district. Workers discussed it over lunch. Shopkeepers debated the likely outcome with customers. Students passed the details around in hushed conversations. Even people with no interest in martial arts wanted to see what would happen. Because this had grown into something much larger than a fight. It had become a confrontation between fear and courage, between a man who took respect and a man who earned it. Inside his training hall, Chen Wei felt invincible. His students surrounded him like attendants around royalty. Every few minutes, one of them repeated the same reassurance: "You'll destroy him, Master. He doesn't know who he's facing, Master. Bruce Lee has no idea what's coming." Each compliment fed his confidence. Each prediction strengthened his certainty. He stopped thinking about winning. Winning was already assumed. The only remaining question was how completely he would humiliate Bruce Lee in front of everyone. As evening arrived, the hall filled rapidly. People pressed into every available space. The walls, the doorways, the balcony, even the windows outside became crowded with faces. The atmosphere grew louder and heavier with each passing minute. Chen Wei stood in the center of the ring with his arms crossed, absorbing every bit of it. This was his domain, his audience, his moment. Tonight would be another performance, another reminder of why challenging him was a mistake. Then the doors opened. The noise dropped almost instantly. Bruce Lee had arrived. No dramatic entrance, no group of followers, no announcement. He simply walked in, calm, focused, dressed in simple black training pants and a sleeveless shirt, nothing more. Yet the entire room felt his arrival. Heads turned, conversations stopped. Chen Wei noticed immediately how people looked at Bruce, not with fear, with something he valued far more: genuine admiration, and that irritated him more than anything else could have. Bruce acknowledged a few elderly spectators with a respectful nod. He smiled at a group of children standing near the wall. His eyes found Madame Li sitting quietly near the front. He smiled at her. She smiled back. Then he stepped into the ring. Chen Wei laughed loudly, attempting to redirect the room's attention. "You actually came." "I said I would," Bruce replied simply. The straightforwardness of it irritated Chen Wei further. Everything about Bruce irritated him: the stillness, the absence of nerves, the complete lack of intimidation. Most opponents entered the ring already mentally defeated. Bruce entered as though he were stepping into an ordinary room for an ordinary conversation. The crowd felt it too. Master Wang stepped between them. The elderly referee studied both men carefully. One burned with aggression, the other carried absolute control. "This is a martial arts contest," Master Wang said firmly. "No attacks after the action is stopped. No prohibited techniques. No excuses." Both fighters nodded. The room fell silent. Bruce rolled his shoulders once. Chen Wei cracked his neck. Master Wang stepped back. "Begin." The crowd erupted. Chen Wei attacked without a single moment of patience. A powerful strike launched toward Bruce's face, incredibly fast, undeniably powerful. The spectators gasped, but Bruce was no longer where he had been. He slipped aside without any visible effort. The punch cut through empty air. A quiet ripple of surprise moved through the room. Chen Wei spun immediately, another strike, another miss. Bruce moved again, smooth, unhurried, almost effortless. Confused glances passed between spectators. Something was wrong with this picture. Chen Wei was one of the most powerful fighters any of them had ever seen, and yet he couldn't make contact. A third attack came, a fourth, a fifth, every single one missed. Bruce flowed around each of them like water moving around stone, never rushing, never anxious, simply unreachable. Doubt began entering the room. Chen Wei felt it immediately, and it transformed his frustration into anger. He launched a vicious kick. Bruce stepped aside. The kick landed on nothing. Then Bruce tapped him lightly on the shoulder. The crowd laughed quietly but noticeably. Chen Wei froze. The laughter stung worse than any blow. "Relax," Bruce said. The words were almost friendly, which somehow made everything worse. Chen Wei roared and charged again, this time with everything: combinations, punches, kicks, elbows, all of it released at once. The audience watched with open mouths. Bruce avoided every single attack, every one. It was as though he could read each movement before it was made, as though the fight had already been decided somewhere he could see and Chen Wei could not. The confidence that had filled the hall earlier continued draining away. People were beginning to notice something that couldn't be ignored. Bruce wasn't struggling. He wasn't working hard. He wasn't worried. The realization spread slowly, then rapidly, then everywhere. Bruce Lee was not fighting Chen Wei. He was demonstrating something to him. Not cruelly, not arrogantly. Simply and clearly, showing the entire room the distance between genuine mastery and performed intimidation. Chen Wei finally managed to brush Bruce's shirt with a technique. The crowd cheered, but Bruce answered immediately, a quick, clean strike to the forehead. Nothing damaging, just precise, just enough. The room erupted again. The first clean point had been scored, and it wasn't Chen Wei's. Chen Wei backed away, breathing harder, thinking for the first time that evening. Uncertainty crossed his face. It looked unfamiliar there. Bruce lowered his hands slightly. "You don't have to continue this." The words shocked everyone in the room. "What? You can still stop." Bruce kept his voice level. He looked toward the watching crowd. "They don't hate you." He looked toward Madame Li. "She doesn't hate you." Then directly at Chen Wei. "You've spent years proving how strong you are. Now prove what kind of man you are." The hall felt frozen. Nobody had expected those words, not during a competition, not from the opponent winning it. Chen Wei stared at him. Then he laughed, short and bitter. "You think you're teaching me something?" Bruce said nothing. The silence was the answer. Something inside Chen Wei fractured. His ego could not absorb this. His reputation could not survive this. His students were watching. The crowd was watching. The whole district was watching. And for the first time in a very long time, someone was standing in front of him who simply wasn't afraid. He charged with everything remaining. Wild, desperate, total. And Bruce, watching the attack come, recognized something important. Chen Wei wasn't fighting him anymore. He was fighting himself. He was fighting the fear of being exposed, the terror of losing what he had spent years constructing. Bruce sidestepped. A precise body strike landed. Chen Wei staggered. Another strike followed, then another, controlled, measured, each one not designed to destroy but to reveal. Every missed attack peeled away another layer of the reputation that had protected him. Every clean counter removed another piece of the fear that had served as his armor. The audience began seeing something they had never witnessed before: a bully struggling, a man who had ruled through terror looking genuinely vulnerable, a person discovering that intimidation has absolutely no effect on someone who refuses to be intimidated. Chen Wei's breathing became labored, his movements slowed, his timing collapsed, his certainty was gone. Bruce remained composed, fresh, utterly focused. "Listen to me," Bruce said. Chen Wei's eyes stayed fixed on him. "You still have a choice." Bruce looked toward the watching faces surrounding them. "They wanted to respect you." The words arrived like something physical. "You chose to make them fear you instead." Chen Wei's hands tightened. "Strength isn't forcing people to lower their heads." Bruce stepped slightly closer. "Strength is making people proud to stand beside you." The silence that followed was overwhelming. Even Chen Wei's own students looked shaken, because somewhere inside each of them, they already knew Bruce was right. They had spent years mistaking fear for genuine respect. And now, for the first time, they were seeing the actual difference. Chen Wei stood motionless, breathing hard. The crowd waited. The fight was no longer about techniques or training or tournaments. It had become something far more significant. And Chen Wei was about to face the most important decision of his life, with an entire city watching every second of it. The dojo held its breath. Nobody whispered, nobody shifted. The air itself seemed to stop moving. Minutes earlier, these hundreds of people had arrived expecting a competition. Now they were watching something they hadn't prepared for: the collapse of an illusion that had controlled their neighborhood for years. For years, Chen Wei had seemed untouchable, invincible, protected by a reputation that people were too frightened to challenge. But fear, when examined honestly, is a remarkably fragile thing. The moment people stop believing in it, it simply dissolves. And in that dojo, at that moment, the belief was dissolving in real time. Chen Wei was not a monster. He was not unstoppable. He was a tired man, a frightened man, a man who had built everything on a foundation that was now visibly crumbling beneath him. Sweat dripped from his face. His chest moved in heavy, uneven waves. His legs felt heavier than they ever had. And across from him, Bruce Lee remained unhurried, composed, completely present. The difference needed no explanation. Chen Wei despised it. He despised the watching crowd. He despised the silence. He despised the way every face in the room had shifted toward Bruce with something that looked unmistakably like trust. But what he despised most was what was happening inside him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Doubt, real, genuine doubt, settling deep into him like something that had always been waiting there. Bruce watched him quietly, no hatred behind his eyes, no hunger for revenge, no visible desire to humiliate, and that strangely made everything harder for Chen Wei to manage, because he finally understood what Bruce was actually doing. He wasn't trying to defeat him, he was trying to reach him, to pull him back from something before it was too late. But pride is a powerful and stubborn companion. Chen Wei had fed it for years. "I don't need your wisdom," he said, jaw tightening. Bruce nodded, maybe not. He wasn't arguing, wasn't celebrating, he simply waited. And then, for the last time, Chen Wei's pride overruled everything else. With a roar that filled every corner of the hall, he charged forward. This was his fastest attack of the night, his most desperate. A full combination: punch, punch, kick, elbow, every remaining piece of energy released at once, aimed directly at Bruce Lee. Bruce moved, the crowd could barely track it. One step, one shift, one pivot, every strike missed cleanly, complete and total. Chen Wei felt something close to panic rising beneath the exhaustion. His combinations grew less precise. His footing became uncertain. His rhythm fell apart entirely. He attacked again, then again, then again. But the harder he pursued, the further the outcome retreated from him. Then the moment arrived. The one that people would remember long after the specific techniques had faded from memory. Chen Wei threw a massive right hand, everything concentrated into a single strike. Bruce moved outside it. A precise counter landed to the body. Chen Wei stopped moving. Another strike arrived, then a third. Fast, clean, deliberate, not brutal, not savage. Precise, like someone correcting a mistake that had been made far too many times. The crowd rose to its feet. Chen Wei stumbled backward. His legs gave way beneath him. He went down, crashing onto the canvas with a sound that seemed to echo through the entire building. The dojo shook with noise. People jumped to their feet. Some shouted, some cheered, some simply stared with expressions that mixed relief and disbelief in equal measure. They had imagined this moment. None of them had truly believed they would see it. Master Wang stepped forward immediately and began counting. 1. The room trembled. 2. Chen Wei pressed his hands against the canvas. His arms shook. 3. 4. The crowd grew louder. 5. His students stood watching, unable to help, unable to change anything. 6. 7. Chen Wei finally understood what was happening. He wasn't getting up, not from exhaustion alone, from something heavier than that, from the weight of everything he had built and everything he had done and the gap between who he had become and who he could have been. Later, Bruce stood quietly nearby, not triumphant, simply present. 9. Chen Wei lowered his head. Something that had been rigid inside him for years finally gave way. 10. It was over. The hall erupted completely. People called Bruce's name. Applause came from every direction. Several elderly spectators wiped their eyes, not because of the fight itself, but because something that had felt impossible had just quietly happened. Something that resembled justice. Bruce did not celebrate. He did not raise his arms. He did not perform for the crowd. Instead, he walked toward Chen Wei and extended his hand. The room went silent again. Everyone watched. Chen Wei stared at the offered hand. Several seconds passed. His pride fought one final, quiet battle. Then slowly, he reached up and accepted it. Bruce helped him to his feet. The crowd watched without a sound. What happened in the next few minutes would matter more than anything that had occurred during the fight itself. Bruce looked at him evenly. The match is finished. Chen Wei kept his eyes down. For years, he had made others do exactly that. You lost a fight tonight, Bruce continued. Then he looked toward the surrounding crowd. You don't have to lose yourself along with it. A long silence followed. Then something nobody had anticipated happened. Chen Wei turned toward Madame Li. The elderly woman sat near the front of the room, small and still. He looked at her, not the way he usually looked at people, calculating the effect, measuring the reaction. He simply looked at her, as a person, possibly for the first time in a very long time. He walked across the dojo slowly. The crowd parted without being asked. Nobody spoke. Nobody interfered. Every eye followed him across the room. When he reached Madame Li, he stopped. His voice, when it came, was quieter than anyone had heard it before. I'm sorry, he paused. I was disrespectful toward you. Another pause. I was wrong. Madame Li looked at him for several moments. Then her expression softened into something patient and warm, not the warmth of victory, not the warmth of satisfaction, but the warmth of someone who had seen enough of life to understand that people are capable of more than their worst moments. I accept your apology, she said. Several people in the room had to look away. Chen Wei then turned to face the broader crowd, the shopkeepers, the laborers, the students, the vendors, the ordinary people whose days he had made harder simply because he could. He drew in a slow breath, and he bowed deeply with his back fully bent in a way that no one present had ever seen from him before. I'm sorry, his voice carried across the room. I confused fear for respect. I believed that strength gave me the right to treat others as lesser than myself. He paused. I was wrong about all of it. The silence that followed lasted several seconds. Then the applause began. Not because he had won anything, not because he was powerful, but because standing in front of a room full of people you have spent years frightening and admitting the truth out loud requires more genuine courage than almost anything else a person can do. Bruce smiled, a small, private smile, the kind that appears when something difficult finally goes the right way. Master Wang stepped forward. The winner, he paused for a moment, Bruce Lee. Thunderous applause filled every corner of the hall. Bruce barely reacted. He looked toward Chen Wei instead. Now your real training begins. Chen Wei looked uncertain. What do you mean? Bruce held his expression steady, learning how to be strong without making others feel small. Those words stayed with Chen Wei for the rest of his life. Years later, people would still talk about the fight. They would recall the counters and the combinations and the moment Chen Wei went down. But anyone who had actually been there would tell you the same thing: the fight wasn't the important part. The important part came after. Because on that night, Bruce Lee defeated more than a skilled and dangerous opponent. He defeated something much harder to beat than any fighter. He defeated fear. And in doing so, he returned to an entire neighborhood, something it had quietly stopped believing it would feel again. Hope.